Now I'm going to talk about avatar race and ethnicity. It's a big topic, so I'll go fast. You will be able to explain the importance of avatar race and ethnicity, and then recognize how racial stereotypes influence avatar use. You'll be able to explain how using othered avatars can be beneficial or harmful, and then design your own avatars to mold the future. Race is a characteristic that's related to physical attributes. Ethnicity is related to cultural attributes. Both are determined with the visual cues, and they're both very important. Throughout history, race and ethnicity imply social potential, how you will respond to someone. Maybe they're in your in-group or your out-group. Do I trust them? Do I not trust them? Should I feel hostile toward them? Though these days it's far less indicative. Race and ethnicity shouldn't matter for how we are going to interact with someone in most cases, because we are in a globalized, internet-connected world. Yet those tendencies, those traditional kind of historical human tendencies, our human feeble minds rely on stereotypes. And so that's something to consider in avatar use. Avatars allow us to choose our race and ethnicity. This idea was wonderful at the beginning of internet-enabled technologies, the utopian promise that we would finally have freedom from marginalized and devalued bodies, and then we would all participate equally. Why? Because otherness would be eradicated, because online you don't have to be your own race. But this incorrectly presumed that the absence of the visual racial cues would reduce the importance of race in the way that people interact online. And it also assumed that people want to cast off their racial identities and all appear similar to each other. And that's not necessarily the case. People do apply race and ethnicity stereotypes to avatars just as they do to humans. Why? Because we treat avatars, they move, they look like humans. We treat them as humans, even though we know that they're not. Our brains are just wired to treat them as humans. So the social meanings of race have been retained in digital spaces. People have this innate desire to assign others to in-group or out-group status, and thus race gives us some guidelines for that categorization of others as in or out-group. When we see non-white avatars, they are often treated with racism. Studies find that white participants who approach black avatars exhibit higher physiological arousal. In an emergency situation, white participants were less likely to help a black avatar than a white avatar. In digital environments in general, white males are overrepresented, non-whites are underrepresented, and when they are presented, they're stereotypically presented. This perpetuates the assumption that everyone online is a white male, but who knows? Maybe it's a fish or a non-white male. So this leads to the idea that non-white participants feel alone, invisible, isolated, unwelcome in online spaces. And because of that, non-whites are less likely to reveal their race and participate online when they're in the minority, which then perpetuates the stereotype. Does this make sense, right? Because people don't feel comfortable expressing their non-whiteness. Then they choose white avatars. Experiencing otherness, the idea of being in someone else's body or race or ethnicity, in their shoes. This can have a positive connotation, perspective taking. It allows us to empathize or understand the other perspective of someone from a different race. But it also might be called identity tourism, which has a negative connotation. The idea that we are appropriating race, culture, through this avatar, trying to pass as but not fully be someone of that race can be offensive, can even increase stereotypes about those people. Studies find that embodying non-white avatars might lead to reduced or increased implicit bias. So in one study, you were a black avatar in a job interview context or a white avatar in a job interview context, and that led to more implicit racism toward people with darker skin than lighter skin. But in another study, in a casual setting, just walking around in a virtual environment, being in a black avatar afterwards led to more open, less stereotyping, less implicit bias toward dark-skinned people than light-skinned people. Maybe it's the setting, maybe it's the task structure. If it's goal-oriented versus free exploration, that might lead to differences in the effects of using different race avatars. More immersion in the virtual environment, more identification with the avatar might change how people respond to the use of non-white avatars. But this research is still in its nascent, it's new, it's early stages, so we should continue to conduct this research, and I don't really have a strong conclusion about this research right now for you. But what I can say is that in some cases it can be positive. And even outside of the context of race, embodying avatars that present a disability improves empathy and helping behaviors. So we know that there can be positive effects of using othered avatars or even non-human avatars. If you embody a cow or a coral reef, it increases empathy and feelings of connection with nature. So what are the implications for design? Well, try not to be racist, please. Your design decisions enable or limit racial identity presentations. It's not just the art of the avatars, but also the interface structures, the customization options you provide, the way that people choose and go through the process of customization, what drop-down menus they see, what comes first in the list. Race and ethnicity is not just skin tone. You should keep that in mind. There's eye shape, lip thickness, hair texture, and style, etc. But you should be cautious about exaggerating characteristics because you could come across as stereotyping, being racist, even though you're trying to present a diversity of avatars. So don't over-exaggerate. But in general, recognize that non-white avatars are usually limited in their availability and they're very stereotyped. But you can be unusual. You don't have to do that. You are the future, my friend. And so hopefully this lecture will help you understand the role that you can play. Okay, to recap, race and ethnicity lead to stereotypes in both humans offline and avatars online. The utopian promise of everyone being able to choose avatars of different races and then avoid racism is false because racism manifests online and non-white avatars are underrepresented as a result of that. Using non-white avatars, though, can lead to positive or negative effects. We need more research on this, but it's possible to promote an understanding or more positive attitudes toward people with darker skin if they use a non-white avatar, assuming it avoids stereotypes and the context is positive and open. So what can you do? Well, you can provide diversity in the avatars that you design, avoid stereotypes, but still make sure that avatars represent different races and ethnicities. Thank you very much. See you next time.